Hello and welcome to this special interview. I am Pooja Shali, and there are some conversations that are very special and dear to me, also because this one is where I'm talking about one issue that is closest to my heart, and that is the Kashmir Valley. And joining me for this interview is someone who has served extensively across Jammu and Kashmir and knows exactly what the situation has been over the years. It's an absolute honor to be interviewing Lieutenant General Satish Dua, who's, remember, been not only a former GOC 15 Corps for Kashmir, but for a career, I think, that's expanded about 4 decades across Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh, has seen the good, bad, ugly, all sides of J&K. And that's why we are going to talk about, in the next half an hour, everything that you have wanted to know about different issues. But, General Dua, while there has been this extensive career that you had, if there's been one issue that pushed you or threw you into, so to say, the public domain and light, it was the surgical strike Uri. I'm sure that you know that it was under his charge that we had that historic surgical strike of September 2016. But what I want to understand from you today is, many have asked you about what that day was, what happened. I want to ask you what that moment meant to you. I know it was personal, as much it was political as it was military. But we talk about the history of it. Why do you think it had to be done? What did it mean for you now that you look back at it after retirement?
Thank you, Pooja, for having me on the interview. It's very nice to talk to you, who is a Kashmiri herself,
yes,
on the topic of Jammu and Kashmir. And before I respond to your question, may I also add that I am also from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment.
Of course.
So,
yes.
so all my soldiers belong only to Jammu and Kashmir. So that's another connect I have.
Absolutely. And you've known these soldiers very closely, because Jackley, the Jammu Kashmir Light Infantry that he's led, that he's been a colonel of, has only J&K
yes.
soldiers. Yes, sir.
True. You are right that, you know, when we talk about Uri or the Uri surgical strikes, and everyone sees an operation that had not been done before that. But why it's very personal to me is, as I never tire of saying, is the fact that for me, Uri is the darkest day of my life.
Why do you say that?
Remember, on 18th of September 2018, when 4 suicide terrorists came in and attacked our camp at Uri, right, bang on the LOC. I lost 18 soldiers, 18 young lives lost on my watch. I repeat this very often.
18 September 2016.
Yeah, exactly. It is then that that very day the defense minister landed up. That very day we got an okay and a go-ahead to launch an operation like raids across the LOC on the terrorist training camps, and we caused that heavy damage. That operation was launched on 28th night, and 29th morning it was announced to the world. But the difference is, whenever Pakistan perpetrates violence by infiltrating terrorists across the line of control, they kill civilians, they kill soldiers, sometimes even mutilate our bodies, and they always deny. Yes. They deny that they are not our terrorists, we have not sent them across, they are your own freedom fighters and things like that. Whereas we took ownership. We took ownership and said, the next day the DGMO, the Director General of Military Operations, came onto world media on a press conference and said, we did this.
So those 10 days must have been very difficult for you, a lot of introspection, thinking that must have happened from Uri attack day to then indulge in the surgical strike across LOC. This was, I think, also, would you agree, to appear as more assertive and not always on the defensive? But how would you ensure, without, I understand, without divulging more details about how there was no chance for error this time? Because if you're talking about ownership, it had to be done right.
You're right, Pooja. I think we also got fortunate that the defense minister, late Mr. Manohar Parrikar, landed up there in Srinagar on that very day. That very day, when there was anger in the country, the nation was outraged at Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. We'd lost soldiers, soldiers wanted revenge. So that very day, when in my office, when army chief was also there, army commander was there, only 4 of us. When we suggested to him, when I suggested that we will go across and hit them, because we don't have terrorists to send across. We are only adopting defensive measures all the time. And then, I mean, I think it was a very bold decision on his part. I expected him to say that he would discuss with the Prime Minister and get back, because it could spiral into something bigger, a bigger war, bigger conflict. But he gave his go-ahead there itself. And I've written extensively about that in this book. So I think that was something that has never been done before. In those intervening 10 days, our soldiers who went across, that was a great team of special forces, and those who went across, they had of course been always being ready. They had many contingencies planned and rehearsed. They were always ready. Given the go-ahead, they would strike across like this. So a lot of training and mock-ups and practices and coordination that went through over the next 10 days, and I can't talk about in detail, but I think it all paid its dividend, and we had a very successful operation. And I would just end by saying, I think fortune favors the brave, and we didn't have a single casualty.
Fortune favors the brave, and I think that speaks truly of Indian armed forces, and especially in scenarios like this. But I have to ask you, before we move on now to the book, that so much is being done on the ground over the past few years, we have seen. But we've also seen terror attacks. It's risen in the Jammu region. There is a series of attacks in Kashmir Valley. And it was heartbreaking, especially how the tourists, pilgrims were attacked in Riyasi, for example. What do you think needs to be done right now? There is police, there are agencies, there is, of course, the Indian Army. What do you think, what would be your suggestion? That there is political will, everything seems to be right. And yet we are not able to stop the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism.
Allow me to put it a little differently.
Sure.
Pooja, what has taken nearly 4 decades to fester cannot be undone overnight. We have seen over the last 5 years, ever since the Article 370 was moderated, we have seen that there is improvement in the situation in every which way.
Correct.
Look at the state of violence. There is no violence spilling on the streets.
Mass street violence, stone pelting, all of that is over. I agree, absolutely.
Schools are running. There are no bands, no hartals. Earlier, the Hurriyat used to issue a calendar, and markets were closed. The tourist was in trepidation whether to go there or not. And today, there is a grassroots empowerment of people. There is panchayat, 3-tier panchayat in place. There is normalcy is returning. The tourism is booming like never
before. Young boys are not getting killed like it happened in the past.
So, and the recruitment towards in the terrorist ranks has dropped considerably, if at all. So many new academic institutions are being opened up. So much business is booming today. The youth in Kashmir Valley enjoys the things that you and I do, we take
Cinemas.
For granted. Multiplex,
yes.
KFC, Haldirams, Nattu Sweets, something that they never did before. So, normalcy is returning toward, we are moving towards normalcy in Kashmir. That being said,
is that bothering
response to
the
your question,
Pakistanis
yes.
more?
So that is bothering the other side. The handlers of these terrorists, the separatists. So they also have to be seen to be doing something. And that is why when things are moving towards normalcy, they want to instill fear in the minds of people. They want to do that. Then they see that elections are coming. So they activated the Jammu region to disrupt the elections. Then we had a very peaceful and a very participative Lok Sabha election.
Absolutely, free and fair. I reported it was incredible.
You were there for so many days. And then came the assembly elections. And pardon my colloquialism, when Article 370 was moderated, and Pakistan made a lot of noise, but eventually, and the colloquialism comes now, eventually they had to lump it. But I would end by saying that it is below a certain threshold. And I think if now the elected government is in place, political aspirations of the people have been given expression, and it now is incumbent on the whole of government approach, security forces, intelligence agencies, and the elected government put together to now keep this peace on track.
Keep this peace on track so people also in J&K can see the kind of normal days that we see across India. You've written this book, A General Reminisces a Life Under Fire in Kashmir, a true story of a terrorist turned hero.
Yes.
And this is not fiction, so to say. He's of course speaking from experience. This is about Lance Naik Nazir Wani. We all remember him, his sacrifice to the nation, but the journey not many are aware about. What I found interesting, that you had an opportunity to write a book. It was not as much about yourself, but parallel to your journey in the army, it's about this young Kashmiri, a Kashmiri Muslim, and how becomes a soldier. Why do you think it's these kind of role models that we need to know more about, and it's best coming from someone like you who served and has known him and has followed that journey?
So Pooja, you're right to use the word role models. You know, it pained me when I was the corps commander in Kashmir. That is the time Burhan Wani attained that fame and notoriety. In 2015 and 16, he posted his picture on a Facebook with 9 of his friends with AK rifles. And then it was during my tenure in July 2016 that we eliminated him. The kind of fan following that he started getting. We need more role models like Nazir Wani, because it also tells a story, tells everyone a story. The story that every youth needs to know about is the fact that the story of Kashmiri patriotism. There is also the other side to Kashmiri youth. And these young men who surrendered, they were terrorists who actually surrendered. They initially formed Ikhwan for nearly 1 decade, a contra-rebel force which helped the army and Rashtriya Rifles and the police in their operations against terrorists. Thereafter, we tried an even bolder experiment. For the first time in the world, arguably, that we made an army battalion out of the surrendered terrorists. And Nazir Wani was one of them. And there were many such stories, but why I picked on Nazir Wani is because he was, at the end, awarded Ashok Chakra, albeit posthumously. But, Pooja, he was not an accidental braveheart. He had 2 Sena medals before that Ashok Chakra. He also has served in the UN peacekeeping forces in Sudan. So he was an epitome of Indian soldier, having started as a terrorist. So I think these are the kind of role models that the youth need.
This is the nuance of Kashmir, and I can say this as a Kashmiri, that we of course know there is Pakistan-sponsored terrorism that has its share of support and sentiment. It's understood. But there are so many of voices and faces like Nazir Wani who have done so much for India, so much for the peace and prosperity of Kashmir. And I think that's where the nuance of Kashmir also comes in. This brings me to the issue of radicalization. I speak to a lot of officers in whether it's Jammu Kashmir Police or the Indian Army, in the agencies, and the terrorists may have a shelf life, General Dua, but I want to understand, tell me about this radicalization and how that is something that needs to be worked on to ensure when Pakistan is trying to radicalize the young Kashmiri boys and girls, how do they do it? How do you, someone like you, are trying to ensure that these young boys are rescued? And then they are shown how India, Kashmir have the best to provide for them. And Nazir Wani is one success story. So tell us more about that. Do you think this is where it has to be a bigger approach of aiming against radicalization and rescuing these boys?
You're right, Pooja, that radicalization is one of the toughest problems that we grapple with as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, and especially the Kashmir Valley. Now, you see, it's very easy for us to say that it's only because of poverty. It's not that. The mushrooming of madrasas that we have seen over the past few decades, we see that the other side has been targeting the Kashmiri youth very assiduously. And then they managed to, especially with the advent of social media. You know, it was initially mobile phones were not allowed in Jammu and Kashmir, you will recall. It was in the mid-2000s that we actually allowed, and then they could reach the youth. And social media has played its part in radicalization of the youth, in mobilizing the youth, etc. But if you also take your mind to it, And this is what Indian Army, the security forces, all of them, do repeatedly. Whenever we, our way of conducting counter-terrorism operations is so much different from the Western countries.
How?
We every time, in an encounter with terrorists, we give them a chance. We shout across. We use loud hailers.
And bring the families to call out for them.
Bring the families, bring the mothers to call out to them. We give them a chance to surrender. And several have surrendered. It is not that it's drawn a blank. But we try and actually get them to surrender first. And those who want to come up and surrender, we give them a chance. There are liberal schemes. Then we want to de-radicalize them. For example, the battalion that I'm talking about, Territorial Army Battalion, Home and Hearth.
From Ikwan to the TA Home and Earth.
Yes. So this is a new concept, and we want to de-radicalize them. If we, let's say, stone pelters, if we take a stone pelter, lock him up in jail for a few days, his family is traumatized. And if we always, his family is traumatized and they have no one to reach out to, that's where the other side reaches out to them. We need to act as counselors. We need to have
especially for the younger teenager group when the hormones are high. There's a certain confusion, perhaps, of life.
Absolutely. So that is the time when we need to reach out to them. If we do, we will be assisting the de-radicalization. And I think we need to take more proactive steps than just a harsh measure to control these youth.
Let's come to the present. You've seen 80s, 90s, 2000s and now. You've also served in Ladakh, in Kargil area, in fact, during that decade. The situation right now along the line of actual control, there's a lot of hope. Yes. Disagreements have happened. Corps commander level talks have happened. What do you think should be our relationship, our equation with China here on? How is it progressing?
So first we need to understand, and when I say we need to understand, I am talking to the viewers, I'm talking to a common Indian citizen. We need to understand the difference between LOC and LAC.
Yes.
They are similar sounding words. They are very similar in as much as the fact that both are unresolved border with two neighboring countries, but the similarity ends there. In LOC with Pakistan, we have not only an exchange of fire across the LOC for decades,
yes.
Though fortunately at the present a ceasefire is holding, but we've had infiltrators coming across, causing violence in Kashmir Valley or in Jammu region and going back. Whereas in the LAC is an unresolved border, true, between India and China. But we haven't fired a shot for over half a century.
True.
We've had a 1962 war, we had an incident in Natula, we had in mid-80s there was some incident, but after that we haven't fired a shot, so much so that this standoff 4 years ago, in 2020, even casualties in Galwan, there were no shots fired. We used primitive weapons, but there were...
Correct.
So now, since then, we have actually activated and made full use of different mechanisms by which we continue to do border personnel meeting, Corps commander level talks. There is a working mechanism between both the foreign ministries. So there are mechanisms like this which continue to engage with each other. The pace of rapprochement has been painstakingly slow, but the fact remains that there has been some progress. And as recent as you heard, we all know, the whole country knows that we have decided to even sort out those patrolling issues at the two remaining flashpoints, Demchok and Depsang plains. So we are making progress. Progress is slow. But I think in that spirit, and both the leaders have met at Kazan.
Yes.
So I think in that spirit, if we continue to make progress, I think that's really a good sign.
As one of the final questions, let's talk about Kashmir and your experience. You've interacted with so many, especially youngsters. What do you think is your hope for how the Kashmir situation here on goes? Because for me, the biggest difference I saw was I entered into the most sensitive lanes this time for election season. I had these youngsters, teenagers who came up to me, so patriotic. They wanted to add to the difference that was happening in Kashmir. They wanted to contribute. They wanted to take India's name ahead. And they wanted this normalcy to continue. But I'm also I know how uncertain Kashmir can be. Do you think youth, that age group, is our hope for Kashmir, for India, and that's how everyone should be ensuring they get the opportunities and the normalcy that they deserve? Do you think they are the ones who are going to lead on to the difference?
Absolutely, and I surely hope so, because we have to engage with the mind space of the youth.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, I'll just go. You remember some leaders, I mean, I'll name it, Mehbooba Mufti said, if Article 370 is tampered with, there will be nobody to hold the tricolor. 5 years down the lane, not only there is a tricolor on top of Lal Chowk, but we see every Republic Day and Independence Day being celebrated with gusto, with a lot of tricolors around.
And voluntarily.
And voluntarily. Like you met youth, Kashmiri Muslim, who I remember seeing in your interviews, who come out and speak openly.
Yes.
The things that we have discussed a little while ago, that how normalcy is returning in Kashmir. I think the youth today, who have tasted the peace dividend, would want this state of affairs to continue, and not that state of affairs where schools were not running, where there were bands and hartals and stone pelting at the drop of the hat, and markets were closed, and every time you were to put the shutters down. Nobody wants that. So I think we need to engage with the mind space of the youth, because for two reasons. Firstly, you cannot change the mindsets of those who are now in their middle age, because they have been only through those protests and runs. And as these youth, today's youth, are the leaders of tomorrow. We have to engage with them, because change will be brought about by them. And that's where I hold out hope that with an elected government in place, which is yet unburdened by the security, responsibility of the security of the state. So they could actually get back to an outreach, administrative reforms, and try and resolve the alienation and the problems of the youth.
For Lance Naik, Nazir Wani, and many like him, many unknown heroes, may not be faces. How has your interaction been like in those few sentences for those, because there has to be a message sent across that there are so many individual Kashmiri Muslims who've taken so much risk, whether they are as soldier in uniform or otherwise. What has been your interaction with Nazir Wani, for example, and others, and what do you want to say to those watching?
I would say that in Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment, or any other army unit where there are Kashmiri Muslims, you don't look over your shoulder and see whether he's a Muslim or a Kashmiri. If you are expecting fire support or a logistic support or any kind of coordination or synergy, it is one soldier is as good as the other. But when you take Nazir Wani specifically, or such soldiers, in my regiment, or the number of Kashmiri soldiers who've got awards and accolades, it is really something is very inspirational. In every Rashtriya Rifle Battalion, there are a few soldiers from Jammu and Kashmir Light Infantry Regiment, my regiment. And they are always found in the commanding officer's QRT, the quick reaction team, or the company commander's, team commander's quick reaction team. They are always there as interpreters, as generating intelligence and participating in operations. They actually have a very big chunk of gallantry medals because of that. So the sentence that I would like to end by, and which I've written here also, obviously prominently, to say that I have been trying to convince the soldiers also, and I tell the country, every Kashmiri Muslim with a beard is not a terrorist. Just like every soldier, I convince the other side, every soldier with an AK rifle is not your enemy. He's there to help you.
There to help you, they are your friend. Thank you for the general reminiscing with me. I appreciate it. So that's the book he's written, A General Reminisces, True Story of a Terrorist Turned Hero. We need more stories to help everyone understand, in Kashmir and outside, about what really is happening and how many of these faces, sometimes unknown, are keeping Kashmir safe and secure and to ensure Pakistan never succeeds. I wish you all the very best. It's been such an amazing conversation.
Thank you,
so
Pooja.
much. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, and I hope we can have more of these conversations, and perhaps only when there are happier times to discuss. Thank you so much.
Pooja.
Thank you so much for watching.